Draco's Incel fantasy. Draco Malfoy had been having what he considered the worst term of his life, which was really saying something considering his father had been publicly humiliated in the Daily Prophet for his regressive views on magical creature rights, and his mother had started attending privilege awareness circles for wealthy pureblood wives. It wasn't just the family drama, though that was bad enough. It was everything else. The way girls at Hogwarts completely ignored him despite his obvious superiority. The way professors like the ghetto snake got away with saying whatever they wanted while he got attention for making one little comment about Granger's hair. The way society was obviously rigged against decent wizards like himself. Draco had been documenting his grievances in what he called his The Black Pill Journal, a leather-bound notebook where he recorded evidence of the gynocentric conspiracy that was ruining wizarding society. Recent entries included: November 15th, Pansy Parkinson chose to sit with that beta Longbottom instead of me during herbology. Clearly because they can manipulate betas like him easier. November 18th, overheard 3 Ravenclaw girls laughing about the nice guys. They are clearly Chad chasers who wouldn't recognize a high-value male if he hexed them. When the sexual revolution collapses, they'll come crawling back to traditional wizards like me. November 20th, Potter continues to receive female attention despite being a trans freak. Proof that society has become completely degenerate. In a natural hierarchy, alpha males like me would be at the top. The truth was, Draco had been spending an alarming amount of time in the Slytherin common room reading forbidden texts he'd ordered by Al from something called Omega Virgin Revolt Magical Library. Books with titles like The Black-Pilled Wizard and The Black Pill Theory, Why It Never Began For You were hidden under his mattress alongside increasingly disturbing pamphlets about lux-maxing and the decline of Western wizarding civilization. His dorm mates had started avoiding him after he'd tried to explain something called facial aesthetics theory using diagrams he'd drawn of different jaw shapes. Crabbe and Goyle, who weren't exactly known for their intellectual curiosity, had literally walked away when he started measuring their canthal tilts with a ruler. "You're becoming weird," Draco, Goyle had said, which was particularly stinging coming from someone who once tried to eat a chocolate frog while it was still hopping. But Draco knew they just didn't understand. They couldn't see what he saw, the systematic oppression of high-value males by a society that had been corrupted by feminist ideology and cultural Marxism. Even in the wizarding world, which should have been immune to muggle degeneracy, the rot had set in. It was during one of his late-night brooding sessions in the abandoned classroom on the 3rd floor that Draco first encountered the mirror. He'd been pacing around, muttering about how Hermione Granger's academic success was obviously the result of affirmative action for Muggleborns, when he noticed something glinting in the moonlight. The mirror was enormous, reaching nearly to the ceiling, with an ornate gold frame that seemed to shimmer with its own light. Strange inscriptions were carved around the edge in a language Draco didn't recognize, though he was pretty sure it wasn't Latin because he'd have expected something more dignified from ancient magical artifacts. Probably some old vanity mirror, he muttered, but something about it drew him forward. Knowing this place, it's probably cursed to show you your worst fear or something equally dramatic. He approached cautiously, one drawn, ready for whatever psychological torture device McGonagall had probably installed to build character in students or whatever. But as he got closer, he realized the mirror wasn't showing his reflection at all. Instead, it showed him, but not as he was now. It showed him as he should be. As he would be if the world were fair. The Draco in the mirror was magnificent. He stood at least 6 feet tall, his shoulders broad and powerful, his jaw sharp enough to cut glass. His hair fell in perfect platinum waves, and his eyes held the kind of confident intensity that made people, especially women, weak in the knees. This was Draco as nature had intended him to be, a true alpha male, a gigachad in every sense of the word. But it wasn't just his physical transformation that mesmerized him. It was the scene around him. Mirror Draco was surrounded by the most beautiful witches Draco had ever seen. Not just pretty, absolutely stunning. Perfect 10s, every one of them. Stacies of the highest caliber, with flowing hair and curves that defied both physics and Hogwarts dress code. They gazed at him with obvious adoration, hanging on his every word, competing for his attention like he was the last piece of chocolate in a box of Bertie Bott's every flavor beans. "Oh, Draco," sighed a blonde witch who looked suspiciously like a more attractive version of Pansy Parkinson, "you're so intelligent and sophisticated. Tell us more about your theories on magical genetics." "Yes, Draco," breathed a brunette who might have been Hermione Granger if Hermione had been born with actual feminine appeal, "your understanding of social dynamics is so profound. We've been such fools, chasing after those inferior beta males when a true alpha like you was right here all along." Mirror Draco smiled with a kind of confident charisma that real Draco had only ever seen in his dreams. "Ladies, please. There's enough of me to go around. But first, let me explain why traditional pureblood values are the foundation of a stable magical society." The witches listened with rapt attention, nodding eagerly at his every word. In the background, Draco could see other male students, Potter, Ulwazer, that pathetic Longbottom, watching with obvious envy and defeat. They had been exposed as the beta cucks they truly were, and now everyone could see the natural hierarchy that should have been obvious from the beginning. "This is it," Draco whispered, his breath fogging the glass. "This is how things should be." He couldn't look away. Every detail was perfect, from the way the light caught his cheekbones to the way the witch's robe seemed to accentuate their figures without being vulgar. This wasn't just wish fulfillment, this was justice. This was the natural order of things, undistorted by the cultural poisoning that had infected modern wizarding society. "The black pill was wrong," he murmured, his face inches from the mirror. "It's not over. This is what happens when you looks max and mind max and just become your true self." In the mirror, he watched as Potter approached his group, clearly hoping to interrupt, but Mirror Draco simply raised an eyebrow and Potter slunk away, thoroughly mocked by his obvious superiority. The witches giggled appreciatively at this display of social dominance. "Did you see how pathetic he looked?" laughed the blonde. "Imagine thinking a trans freak could compete with a real man like Draco." "I can't believe we ever found that attractive," agreed the brunette. "I suppose we were just brainwashed by all that progressive propaganda about gender equality." "Fortunately," said Mirror Draco, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had never doubted his place in the world, "traditional masculinity is making a comeback. Women are starting to remember what they really want: strong, intelligent men who aren't afraid to speak uncomfortable truths." Real Draco nodded eagerly. "Yes, exactly. Finally, someone who gets it." He spent the rest of the night staring into the mirror, watching different scenarios play out. Sometimes he was giving a speech to admiring crowds about the importance of magical eugenics. Sometimes he was effortlessly defeating Potter in a duel while witches swooned. Sometimes he was simply existing in his perfected form, his mere presence enough to make inferior males acknowledge their place in the hierarchy. By the time dawn broke, Draco's eyes were bloodshot and his legs were cramping from standing in one position for so long, but he felt more energized than he had in months. He'd seen the truth of what he could become, what he deserved to be. "Tomorrow," he promised his reflection, "I'm going to start my transformation. Looks maxing, mind maxing, whatever it takes. This is my destiny." But as he turned to leave, he caught sight of his actual reflection in the dark window, pale, scrawny, with the kind of weak jawline that would get him labelled a beta on any looks rating forum. The contrast was so stark that for a moment, he felt a crushing wave of despair. "No," he said firmly, shaking his head. "That's just the current me. The mirror shows the real me. The me that's waiting to emerge once I put in the work." He spent the next day researching magical enhancement methods, from bone-lengthening curses to jaw-strengthening exercises. He even considered brewing illegal muscle-building potions, though he wasn't sure he trusted his skills in that area after the disaster with the polyjuice potion. But that night, he was back at the mirror, and the night after that, and the night after that. Each time, the fantasy became more elaborate, more detailed, more perfectly tailored to his deepest desires for validation and social dominance. "You understand me," he whispered to his reflection after a particularly vivid scene where he'd been crowned King of Hogwarts by popular acclaim. "You're the only one who sees what I really am." Mirror Draco smiled back with perfect confidence. "Of course I do. I am what you are, and what you are is magnificent. Don't let the degenerates and feminists convince you otherwise." "I won't," Draco promised. I'll never let them break me down again. But somewhere in the back of his mind, a small voice wondered why his magnificent future self was spending so much time talking to a mirror instead of actually living that perfect life. He quickly suppressed the thought. That was just his beta conditioning trying to sabotage his awakening. The mirror knew better. The mirror showed the truth. And the truth was that Draco Malfoy was destined for greatness just as soon as the world stopped being so unfair to superior men like himself.